Today, I want to talk a little bit about paradoxical interventions from an Ericksonian strategic therapy perspective. I've done a little bit of reading recently on this topic, and I find that there's a common misunderstanding among some people who kind of view a paradoxical intervention and label it something like reverse psychology, meaning that you just tell the person uh, to do the opposite of what they're doing or not doing, and that will help clear up the problem. So if somebody's performing a symptom, instead of telling them to stop, you just tell them to perform the symptom, and that reverse psychology may get them to stop the symptom itself. Um, Maybe in some cases, but I think again there's a fundamental misunderstanding and a maybe a overlooking of a pattern of behavior and context. So what I want to do is briefly give you my understanding of how I work with paradoxical interventions based on the work I've studied from Dr. Erickson and Jay Haley, Chloe Madanis, and their work, and other people who've utilized those ideas. Basically, from my perspective, I found that when Erickson was working with people, a lot of times he wasn't treating the problem. He was sometimes also treating the client's attempts at solution to the problem. Now, what I mean is, when we have a problem, we as human beings naturally try to solve our problem or change our internal, external functioning regulation if we feel something isn't right, something's causing us discomfort. We may move away from a certain symptom or move toward something in any way to try and instinctively move ourselves away from the problem. So we try to come up with our own solution sometimes without even thinking. So, for example, if someone has social phobia, their solution is avoidance a lot of times. So it gets beyond just that the problem is I'm anxious around people. Avoiding people can become a attempted solution which only reinforces the problem. As I've said, I don't know, for years now, you can't have a problem without a solution. Those kind of feed each other sometimes, and in these cases the attempted solution may be even worse than the problem itself. So people get stuck into this circular vicious cycle of patterning, and it's sometimes with the best of intentions. So a paradoxical intervention is a way to get in and short circuit or alter the patterning that has been created through the problem and attempted solution. So if someone has depression and that they're spending a lot of time just feeling worthless and sad about life in general, just telling them, well, you should go and feel as worthless and sad as possible. And I think that's good. That in and of itself is not going to stop that circle of attempted solution and problem. So Erickson may sometimes ask the person to change the location where they do their problem, change the way that they perform the problem. So, for example, someone who has an obsessive compulsive anxiety is not kept from doing the problem, but asking them to do it slightly different way. In a different time, perhaps. Maybe somebody who has a compulsion to wash their hands at certain situations, maybe Erickson hypothetically would ask them to wash their hands before that situation occurred. Anything to kind of disrupt that pattern. Also, changing the context. When we encourage somebody to do their attempted solution to the problem, but in a different context, that can sometimes change that uh, circularity that's going on between problem and solution, kind of strengthening each other. So when Erickson would have someone do something that seems just absurd, it's really with a fundamental understanding of what's led up to that. So, for example, there's a case Erickson had where a guy who would have, when he would drive, he would have panic attacks and couldn't drive very long and would just feel dizzy and feel like he's going to die and all these like I was having a heart attack. So Erickson told him that he would needed to go put on his best suit and then at night get up at night where there's very little traffic around, because at the time Erickson lived in Phoenix, much different than Phoenix is today. You get a little bit out of town and there's not much traffic at midnight or 1 o'clock in the morning then. And he was to drive his car just a short period of time from telephone pole to telephone pole. And he was to drive his car and stop the car, get out at each telephone pole and lie in the ditch for just a couple of minutes, get back into the car, drive to the deck. And then the guy eventually got to the point where he got outside of town a good bit. He just got frustrated and just got back in the car and drove all the way home. And he didn't have the problem anywhere near as severely or possibly at all later. And it sounds like a miraculous and crazy intervention, but what the man was doing before was avoiding or trying to do it too much and then getting overwhelmed and going to this. So by just breaking up the pattern and having him do something that's maybe a little silly, like putting on his best suit, it's kind of loosening that supportive solution and problem connection there, and adding a little absurdity, which kind of helps loosen some things up. So when people are saying they want to do paradoxical interventions, it has to be more than just tell them to do the opposite. There's got to be a clear understanding, and I think this is where it's important to get as much detail sometimes about how people perform their attempted solutions and problems rather than spending too much time on why they're doing it, because we can spend years on why someone does something instead of how they're doing it. So if someone comes to me and say they're having an obsessive compulsive problem, I want to know not just what's the problem is that they're reacting to, but what specifically they're doing in their obsessive compulsive ritual or action. Same thing with depression. If it's a situational, how are they doing their depression? Are they isolating? Are they you know, spending time away from everyone? Are they spending time just ruminating on things? Are they doing any other kind of activities? So getting as much information allows us to understand what their attempted solution is. So if you're really depressed, believe it or not, your attempted solution may be to isolate yourself. And that's terrible to do when you're depressed. But that's what sometimes we feel like we have to go into this cave. And so, that may be a part of an attempted solution. So maybe to play with that. Maybe the isolation could serve a function in the intervention. So anyway, again, anything that we can do looking at the problem and the attempted solution, and how maybe focusing on the attempted solution and tweaking that may in of itself cause the reaction to the problem. Because I think Erickson viewed life, we go along and we get this problem and we get stuck in that. So if we can just free ourselves up from trying to solve some of the problems, that alone would help move people on further down the road. So I could say so much more on this, but I just tried to make a short video. But it's a fairly simple, but yet at the same time paradoxically complex tactic to use. So again, if you're going to use this, make sure you spend some time reading up on it and really examining the work of people who have done this, to maybe have a more in-depth understanding of how it can be an effective therapeutic skill to employ. Hope this helps. Hope you're having a great day. Take care.